Good morning. You're listening to WVUD HD2 Newark, The Basement. I'm Zach Davis, and this is Our Brief Hour, where we celebrate the poetry and prose that make our brief hour on this earth a beautiful one. Today I'm here with my mom, Lisa, to do part 2 of our show on Henry V, who appears in 3 of Shakespeare's plays. Last week we covered Henry IV, parts 1 and 2, where Henry V was a roisterous youth, as the heir apparent, and this week we'll be looking at Henry as king, as he shows up in Shakespeare's play Henry V. So when we left Henry, he had just exceeded the throne, and his father had given him one last piece of advice on his deathbed. Your nobles are untrustworthy. They rebelled against Richard II to put me on the throne, and they're not going to be any more loyal to you. So the way to avoid civil strife is to get them all fighting a foreign war, and then at least they'll be fighting your enemies rather than fighting you. So Henry takes this advice to heart, and he starts considering making war on France, which is what you do if you're an English king in the Middle Ages. On top of this, the play Henry V opens with this really odd scene between two churchmen, the Archbishop of Canterbury and the Bishop of Ely. They remark that Henry is considering a law that's going to take a lot of money away from the church, and they want to discourage this. And the way they plan on doing it is to distract Henry from these domestic issues, from the laws he's going to pass, by pushing him toward France. And the big roadblock for Henry is whether his claim to France, which the English kings have asserted for centuries, is legitimate. It's very dubious. So this scene occurs in Henry's throne room as he's addressing the Archbishop of Canterbury. We would be resolved of some things of weight that task our thoughts concerning us and France. My learned Lord Canterbury, we pray you to proceed and justly and religiously unfold why the law Salic, that they have in France, or should not bar us in our claim. And, God forbid, my dear and faithful lord, that you should fashion, rest, or bow your reading, or nicely charge your understanding soul with opening titles miscreate, whose right suits not in native colours with the truth. For God doth know how many now in health shall drop their blood in approbation of what your reverence shall incite us to. Therefore take heed how you impawn our person, how you awake our sleeping sword of war. We charge you, in the name of God, take heed. For never two such kingdoms did contend without much fall of blood, whose guiltless drops are every one a woe, a sore complaint gainst him whose wrong gives edge unto the swords that make such waste in brief mortality. Under this conjuration speak, my lord, for we will hear, note, and believe in heart that what you speak is in your conscience washed as pure as sin with baptism. May I, with right and conscience, make this claim. There are two things that Henry reveals about himself here. First, he is concerned about prosecuting a war, and he seems legitimately worried about innocent people being killed. Of course, this is mostly the peasantry, because they're going to make up the front lines of his army. And the other is this really, really strange moment where he says, this is going to be your fault, Canterbury. If I'm doing this illegally, it's because you told me to. What your reverence shall incite us to, almost like he has no agency in this at all. And we'll see Henry doing this all throughout the play. He makes sure everyone knows that if things go wrong, it's because they screwed up, not because he screwed up. So right after this, Henry receives a visit from the French ambassador who's coming from the Dauphin, the son of the French king, Charles VI at the time. And this is what Henry says to him. We are no tyrant, but a Christian king, unto whose grace our passion is as subject as are our wretches fettered in our prisons. Therefore, with frank and with uncurbed plainness, tell us the Dauphin's mind.
Thus, then, in few. Your Highness, lately sending into France, did claim some certain dukedoms, in the right of your great predecessor, King Edward III. In answer of which claim, the Prince our master says that you savour too much of your youth, and bids you be advised there's naught in France that can be with a nimble galliard won. You cannot revel in dukedoms there. He therefore sends you meeter for your spirit, this ton of treasure, and, in lieu of this, desires you let the dukedoms that you claim hear no more of you. This the Dauphin speaks.
What treasure?
Tennis balls, my liege.
We are glad the Dauphin is so pleasant with us. His present and your pains we thank you for. When we have matched our rackets to these balls, we will in France by God's grace play a set shall strike his father's crown into the hazard. Tell him he hath made a match with such a wrangler that all the courts of France will be disturbed with chases. And we understand him well, how he comes o'er us with our wilder days, not measuring what use we made of them. We never valued this poor seat of England, and therefore, living hence, did give ourself to barbarous licence, as 'tis ever common that men are merriest when they are from home. But tell the Dauphin, I will keep my state, be like a king, and show my sail of greatness, when I do rouse me in my throne of France. For that I have laid by my majesty, and plotted like a man for working days, but I will rise there with so full a glory, that I will dazzle all the eyes of France, yea, strike the Dauphin blind to look on us. And tell the pleasant prince, this mock of his hath turned his balls to gunstones, and his soul shall stand sore charged for the wasteful vengeance that shall fly with them. For many a thousand widows shall this his mock out of their dear husbands, mock mothers from their sons, mock castles down, and some are yet ungotten and unborn, that shall have cause to curse the Dauphin's scorn. But this all lies within the will of God, to whom I do appeal, and in whose name tell you the Dauphin I am coming on, to venge me as I may, and to put forth my rightful hand in a well-hallowed cause. So get you hence in peace, and tell the Dauphin his jest will savour but of shallow wit, when thousands weep more than did laugh at it. Convey them with safe conduct. Fare you well.
This was a merry message.
We hope to make the sender blush at it. Therefore, my lords, omit no happy hour that may give furtherance to our expedition, for we have now no thought in us but France, save those to God that run before our business. Therefore, let our proportions for these wars be soon collected, and all things thought upon that may with reasonable swiftness add more feathers to our wings. For God before will chide this Dauphin at his father's door. Therefore let every man now task his thought, that this fair action may on foot be brought. Henry here is sort of seizing an opportunity in a way, and it's true of Henry throughout this play that we can never tell when we're seeing legitimate emotions from him and when we're seeing political calculation from him. So is he really, really upset that the Dauphin has sent him this really insulting gift? The Dauphin sent him a box full of tennis balls because Henry was known even in France as a misbehaved youth who only cared about running around and having fun and getting drunk and stuff, and not about matters of state. So the Dauphin is saying, stick with your tennis balls, little boy. Don't try to play with the big boys. So when Henry replies to this, after just having word from the Archbishop of Canterbury that he's in the right, legally speaking, to exercise a claim on France as a whole, to claim the whole country of France for himself and for England, is he really ticked off at the Dauphin, or does he just see this as the perfect opportunity? We then travel to France, where Henry and his army are besieging the town of Harfleur, and this is during the battle. "Once more unto the breach, dear friends, once more, or close the wall up with our English dead." In peace there's nothing so becomes a man as modest stillness and humility, but when the blast of war blows in our ears, then imitate the action of the tiger. Stiffen the sinews, summon up the blood, disguise fair nature with hard favored rage, then lend the eye a terrible aspect. Let pry through the portage of the head like a brass cannon. Let the brow o'erwhelm it as fearfully as doth a galled rock o'erhang and juddy his confounded base, swilled with the wild and wasteful ocean. Now set the teeth and stretch the nostril wide, hold hard the breath, and bend up every spirit to his full height. On, you noblest English, whose blood is fet from fathers of war-proof. Fathers that, like so many Alexanders, have in these parts, from morn till even, fought and sheathed their swords for lack of argument. Dishonor not your mothers. Now attest that those whom you called fathers did beget you. Be copy now to men of grosser blood, and teach them how to war. And you, good yeomen, whose limbs were made in England, show us here the mettle of your pasture. Let us swear that you are worth your breeding, which I doubt not. For there is none of you so mean and base that hath not noble lustre in your eyes. I see you stand like greyhounds in the slips, straining upon the start. The game's afoot. Follow your spirit, and upon this charge cry, God for Harry, England, and St. George! Henry's doing a few unusual things in this speech. First, and we talked about this in a class I took last semester with Professor Wilson, he's educating his men. He's giving them like step-by-step instructions. Stiffen your sinews, summon up your blood, disguise your fair nature, lend your eye a terrible aspect. And maybe this is just his personality, or maybe it's because his troops are really new in the ways of war. In reality, the history of the Battle of Agincourt and Henry's campaigns in France, his troops were professional soldiers, mercenaries. But in the play, Shakespeare emphasizes how undermanned and outclassed Henry's army is. It's like poor peasants who were firing bows at the nobles of France, riding around in, their 50 pounds of heavy plate armor on their expensive horses. And it makes Henry's eventual victory all the more impressive. But so Henry is acting almost as a teacher to these people, which is weird because up until a few years ago, he was as irresponsible and new to war as any of them.
There's another aspect to this, and that is that the Battle of Harfleur, which takes place before the Battle of Agincourt, was a siege that lasted, 3 months? It was an incredibly long siege to take this town. And these men are exhausted. The supplies are getting fewer and fewer, and just to keep fighting is waging war with themselves. And here's Henry trying to goad them into a fighting spirit. And this is where I think Shakespeare pays homage to Henry's hero aspect, or at least tries to build it up, which is one of Shakespeare's purposes in this play.
Although it's interesting, we're I'm personally not sure whether he's trying to build up Henry as a hero or Henry as a masterful politician, because I think you can see both in here. His rhetoric is astonishing, but we're just never quite sure whether Henry actually believes the stuff he's saying or whether it's all a fantastic game on his part, a huge manipulation.
And whether or not he believes what he's saying, he has to win this war. So he has to have fighting men in the trim. And there's a huge part of that in this speech as well, which is also a political statement. We've got to get this town.
And it's interesting you use the word goad, because he's also doing that in the basest sense. He's trying to prick these men's honor. He even says at one point, prove that the ones who you call your fathers really did beget you. In other words, prove that you're not bastards. Prove that your mother was actually loyal to her husband. This is like the equivalent of today making your mama jokes and like insulting someone else by talking about their family, their parents. And Henry is pushing his soldiers by saying, prove that you're not these crass, stereotyped English bumpkins that the whole world thinks you are. And this need of his, this constant push of his to elevate his men and to ennoble them, we see it starting here, and it carries through and reaches its apogee in the Crispin's Day speech.
And you have to remember also that while these soldiers are professional in the sense they're being paid actually rather a fair wage for the day,
they're scuzz.
They're scuzz. Henry emptied the jails to get the majority of his troops. So, these men may very well be bastards who have no idea who their parents are.
And he just hits it over and over again. Dishonor not your mothers. Be copy now to men of grosser blood. Because it would be intimidating if you were a peasant fighting some nobleman who's making millions of pounds a year. At least, the way we'd think of it. They weren't actually making millions of dollars back in the day. Because their money was inflation was so much less severe than it is today. None of you are so mean and base that you don't have noble luster in your eyes. Henry is really hitting this over the head.
And this plays into your theories about, Henry's goals in doing any of this. And as we see further along in this play, Henry really aligns himself with this impoverished peasantry. And we have to ask ourselves, can he really do that? Does he really do that? Does he think that he is kin to these people?
So we see the flip side of Henry as soon as the town Harfleur yields. Or as it's like Harfleur is on the ropes and Henry is appealing to the governor and saying, yield now. And so this is his speech to the governor of Harfleur. Harfleur is not yet surrendered. How yet resolves the governor of this town? This is the latest parley we will admit. Therefore to our best mercy give yourselves, or like to men proud of destruction defy us to our worst. For as I am a soldier, a name that in my thoughts becomes me best, if I begin the battery once again, I will not leave the half-achieved Harfleur till in her ashes she lie buried. The gates of mercy shall be all shut up, and the fleshed soldier, rough and hard of heart, in liberty of bloody hand, shall range with conscience wide as hell, mowing like grass your fresh fair virgins and your flowering infants. What is it then to me, if impious war, arrayed in flames like to the prince of fiends, do with his smirched complexion all fell feats and link to waste and desolation? What is to me, when you yourselves are cause, if your pure maidens fall into the hand of hot and forcing violation? What reign can hold licentious wickedness when down the hill he holds his fierce career? We may as bootless spend our vain command upon the enraged soldiers in their spoil, as send precepts to the Leviathan to come ashore. Therefore, you men of Harfleur, take pity of your town and of your people, whiles yet my soldiers are in my command, whiles yet the cool and temperate wind of grace o'erblows the filthy and contagious clouds of heady murder, spoil, and villainy. If not, why, in a moment, look to see the blind and bloody soldier with foul hand defile the locks of your shrill shrieking daughters, your fathers taken by the silver beards and their most revered heads dashed to the walls, your naked infants spitted upon pikes, whiles the mad mothers with their howls confused do break the clouds, as did the wives of Jewry at Herod's bloody hunting slaughtermen. What say you? Will you yield and this avoid? Or, guilty in defense, be thus destroyed? And so Harfleur yields. And Henry says this to his uncle Exeter, who's one of his generals. Open your gates. Come, Uncle Exeter, go you and enter Harfleur. There remain, and fortify it strongly against the French. Use mercy to them all. For us, dear uncle, the winter coming on and sickness growing upon our soldiers, we will retire to Calais. Tonight in Harfleur we will be your guest. Tomorrow for the march are we addressed. So Henry uses absolutely vile terms to intimidate the governor of Harfleur, and we see, just as we did in his talk with Canterbury, that Henry's telling the governor that if this goes bad, it's going to be your fault, not mine. It's going to be your fault that your virgins are raped and your infants are smashed into walls. And just after he's talked to his men about how honorable they can be and how noble they are, he describes them to the governor as the fleshed soldier, rough and hard of heart, in liberty of blood, who Henry will literally not be able to control. These men are so bloodthirsty and wild that as soon as they get scent of a virgin of Harfleur, they're just going to be on her like wolves, like ravening wolves. So what happened? This is like 2 scenes after Henry gives this wonderful speech to stir up his men once more under the breach. What happened in the interim? Is Henry, does he mean this? But by the same token, for whatever threats he uses, he gets what he wants, which is the surrender of Harfleur without any more bloodshed. And he says to his uncle, use them with mercy. Don't kill anyone. Don't allow any rape. We'll find out in the next scene. Don't allow anyone to steal anything. Make sure that all our soldiers pay fair price for the things they take. So which is the real Henry? Or are they both the real Henry? This is on the road after Harfleur. They're marching toward Calais, and Agincourt is between Harfleur and Calais, so that's where the battle will take place. The French will sort of try to ambush them and stop them from getting to Calais, which is an English port at this point, so that's home base for Henry. If they make it there, they're safe. And Henry is talking to one of his leaders, one of his soldiers named Fluellen. And this is what Fluellen reports from about a soldier that Henry knows very well from his days at Eastcheap. This is one of the dudes that he hung out with back in that roisterous youth.
The perdition of the adversary hath been very great, reasonable great. Marry, for my part, I think the Duke hath lost never a man, but one that is like to be executed for robbing the church, one Bardolph, if your majesty know the man. His face is all boobacles and whelks and knobs and flames of fire, and his lips blows at his nose, and it is like a coal of fire, sometimes blue, sometimes red, but his nose is executed and his fire's out.
We would have all such offenders so cut off, and we give express charge that in our marches through the country there be nothing compelled from the villages, nothing taken but paid for, none of the French upbraided or abused in disdainful language. For when lenity and cruelty play for a kingdom, the gentler gamester is the soonest winner.
It's later now. The men have been marching for days and days in inclement weather. They've been overcome with dysentery. They are tired. They are hungry. The kinds of things they've been eating are appalling. They're desperate to get to Calais, but it is the night now before they meet the French on the field, and Henry takes some time to cloak himself and walk around the camp and listen to what his men are saying. And so this is a conversation that King Henry has with one of his soldiers named Williams. We see yonder the beginning of the day, but I think we shall never see the end of it. Who goes there?
A friend.
Under what captain serve you?
Under Sir Thomas Erpingham.
A good old commander, and a most kind gentleman. I pray you, what thinks he of our estate?
Even as men wrecked upon a sand, that looked to be washed off the next tide.
He hath not told his thought to the king?
No, nor is it not meet he should. For though I speak it to you, I think the king is but a man as I am. The violet smells to him as it doth to me. The element shows to him as it doth to me. All his senses have but human conditions. His ceremonies laid by, in his nakedness he appears but a man. And though his affections are higher mounted than ours, yet when they stoop with the like wing. Therefore, when he sees reason of fears, as we do, his fears out of doubt be of the same relish as ours are. Yet, in reason, no man should possess him with any appearance of fear, lest he, by showing it, should dishearten his army.
This is another soldier involved in the conversation, Bates. He may show whatever outward courage he will, but I believe, as cold a night as 'tis, he could wish himself in Thames up to the neck, and so I would he were, and I by him, at all adventures, so we were quit here.
By my troth, I will speak my conscience of the king. I think he would not wish himself anywhere but where he is.
Then I would he were here alone. So should he be sure to be ransomed, and many poor men's lives saved.
I dare say you love him not so ill to wish him here alone. Howsoever you speak this to feel other men's minds, methinks I could not die anywhere so contented as in the king's company, his cause being just and his quarrel honourable.
Williams interjects, that's more than we know. Bates says, aye, and more than we should seek after, for we know enough, and we know we are king's subjects. If his cause be wrong, our obedience to the king wipes the crime of it out of us. Williams, but if the cause be not good, the king himself hath a heavy reckoning to make, when all those legs and arms and heads chopped off in battle shall join together at the latter day, and cry all, we died at such a place, some swearing, some crying for a surgeon, upon their wives left poor behind them, some upon the debts they owe, some upon their children rawly left. I am afeard there are few die well that die in a battle. For how can they charitably dispose of anything when blood is their argument? Now, if these men do not die well, it will be a black matter for the king that led them to it, whom to disobey were against all proportion of subjection.
So if a son that is by his father sent about merchandise do sinfully miscarry upon the sea, The imputation of his wickedness by your rule should be imposed upon his father that sent him? Or if a servant under his master's command, transporting a sum of money, be assailed by robbers, and die in many irreconciled iniquities, you may call the business of the master the author of the servant's damnation? But this is not so. The king is not bound to answer the particular endings of his soldiers, the father of his son, nor the master of his servant, for they purpose not their death when they purpose their services. Besides, there is no king, be his cause never so spotless, if it come to the arbitrament of swords, can try it out with all unspotted soldiers. Some, peradventure, have on them the guilt of premeditated and contrived murder, some of beguiling virgins with the broken seals of perjury, some making the wars their bulwark, that have before gored the gentle bosom of peace with pillage and robbery. Now if these men have defeated the law and outrun native punishment, though they cannot strip men, they have no wings to fly from God. War is his beadle, war is vengeance, so that here men are punished for before breach of the king's laws, in now the king's quarrel. Where they feared the death, they have borne life away, and where they would be safe, they perish. Then, if they die unprovided, no more is the king guilty of their damnation than he was before guilty of those impieties for the which they are now visited. Every subject's duty is the king's, but every subject's soul is his own. Therefore should every soldier in the wars do as every sick man in his bed, wash every mote out of his conscience, and dying so, death is to him advantage. Or not dying, the time was blessedly lost wherein such preparation was gained, and in him that escapes, it were not sin to think that, making God so free an offer, he let him outlive that day to see his greatness and to teach others how they should prepare.
We can see Williams nodding his head and acknowledging, though perhaps not affably, "'Tis certain, every man that dies ill, the ill upon his own head. The king is not to answer it." Bates says, "But I do not desire he should answer for me, and yet I determine to fight lustily for him."
Bates is totally willing to kiss Henry's butt here. He doesn't know it's Henry, but he's sort of the ideal of the perfect subject. And Henry says, "I myself heard the king say he would not be ransomed."
"Aye, he said so to make us fight cheerfully, but when our throats are cut, he may be ransomed, and we ne'er the wiser."
"If I live to see it, I will never trust his word after."
"You pay him then. That's a perilous shot out of an elder gun, that a poor and private displeasure can do against a monarch. You may as well go about to turn the sun to ice with fanning in his face with a peacock's feather. You'll never trust his word after. Come, 'tis a foolish saying."
In this whole argument, it seems like Williams is making much clearer and more coherent points than Henry is. Henry goes off on this whole weird tangent about how, like, you can't blame the father if he sends his son on a ship and the ship gets taken by pirates or whatever. And Williams is saying Williams is using the classic just following orders excuse, but when you're a subject of a king, the just following orders excuse is actually completely legitimate. You know, the church of the time preached that this is what you had to do. You had to follow a king, no matter how bad you thought his orders were. You weren't entitled to say, "You broke the social contract, I'm out. I'm not going to fight for you." You couldn't do that. You had to fight anyway. And when Williams talks about dying badly, he means dying without confessing. And in the Catholic Church, if you die without confessing, you go to hell because your sins are still on your head. Or at least you go to purgatory. So Williams is saying, if we all die in this battle for some weird cause, like whatever Henry thinks he's doing out here, which we have no idea about, we peasants don't know what the heck the Salic law is, nor do we really care about it. None of them are ever going to hang out in France anyway. What do they care if if Henry gets to officially call himself King of France versus Charles VI. But what they care about is whether they live or die on the battlefield. And if they die, they're terrified of knowing that they're dying and going to hell. And Henry doesn't really have an answer for this. And Shakespeare kind of has to write himself out of this corner by having Williams capitulate immediately and saying, yeah, well, you're right. The soul of every subject is his own. But throughout this, Williams makes the much more coherent argument against Henry that kings have this really serious responsibility to their subjects, and Henry doesn't really know what to do with it. And we hear that loud and clear after he's finished up talking to Williams and Bates. Henry is sort of sitting and staring at the fire, and this is the only interior moment we have of Henry in this play. He starts musing to himself. Upon the king, let us our lives, our souls, our debts, our careful wives, our children, and our sins lay on the king. We must bear all. O hard condition, twin-born with greatness, subject to the breath of every fool whose sense no more can feel but his own wringing. What infinite heart's ease must kings neglect that private men enjoy? And what have kings that privates have not too, save ceremony, save general ceremony? And what art thou, thou idle ceremony? What kind of God art thou, that sufferest more of mortal griefs than do thy worshippers? What are thy rents? What are thy comings in? O ceremony, show me but thy worth. What is thy soul of adoration? Art thou aught else but place, degree, and form, creating awe and fear in other men, wherein thou art less happy being feared than they in fearing? What drink'st thou oft instead of homage sweet, but poisoned flattery? Oh, be sick, great greatness, and bid thy ceremony give thee cure. Think'st thou the fiery fever will go out with titles blown from adulation? Will it give place to flexure and low bending? Canst thou, when thou command'st the beggar's knee, command the health of it? Now, thou proud dream that placed so subtly with the king's repose, I am a king that find thee. And I know 'tis not the balm, the sceptre and the ball, the sword, the mace, the crown imperial, the intertissued robes of gold and pearl, the farced title running for the king, the throne he sits on, nor the tide of pomp that beats upon the high shore of this world. No, not all these, thrice gorgeous ceremony, not all these, laid in bed majestical, can sleep so soundly as the wretched slave, who, with a body filled and vacant mind, gets him to rest, crammed with distressful bread, never sees horrid night, the child of hell. But like a lackey, from the rise to set, sweats in the eye of Phoebus, and all night sleeps in Elysium. Next day after dawn doth rise and help Hyperion to his horse, and follows so the ever-running year with profitable labor to his grave. And but for ceremony, such a wretch, winding up days with toil and nights with sleep, had the forehand and vantage of a king. The slave, a member of the country's peace, enjoys it, but in gross brain little wots what watch the king keeps to maintain the peace, whose hours the peasant best advantages. Oh, God of battles, steel my soldiers' hearts, possess them not with fear, take from them now the sense of reckoning, if the opposed numbers pluck their hearts from them. Not today, O Lord, oh, not today. Think not upon the fault my father made encompassing the crown. I Richard's body have interred anew, and on it have bestowed more contrite tears than from it issued forced drops of blood. 500 poor I have in yearly pay, who twice a day their withered hands hold up toward heaven to pardon blood. And I have built 2 chantries, where the sad and solemn priests sing still for Richard's soul. More will I do, though all that I can do is nothing worth, since that my penitence comes after all, imploring pardon. And then it's the next morning, and Henry's generals are surveying the French lines.
And those French lines are formidable. Oh, that we now had here but 1/10,000 of those men in England that do no work today.
What's he that wishes so? My cousin Westmoreland? No, my fair cousin. If we are marked to die, we are enough to do our country loss. And if to live, the fewer men, the greater share of honor. God's will, I pray thee, wish not 1 man more. By Jove, I am not covetous for gold, nor care I who doth feed upon my costs. It yearns me not if men my garments wear, such outward things dwell not in my desires. But if it be a sin to covet honor, I am the most offending soul alive. No, faith, my coz, wish not a man from England. God's peace, I would not lose so great an honor as 1 man more, methinks, would share from me for the best hope I have. Oh, do not wish 1 more. Rather proclaim it, Westmoreland, through my host, that he which hath no stomach to this fight, let him depart. His passport shall be made, and crowns for convoy put into his purse. We would not die in that man's company that fears his fellowship to die with us. This day is called the Feast of Crispian. He that outlives this day and comes safe home will stand a tiptoe when the day is named, and rouse him at the name of Crispian. He that shall live this day and see old age will yearly on the vigil feast his neighbors, and say, Tomorrow is St. Crispian. Then will he strip his sleeve and show his scars, and say, These wounds I had on Crispin's day. Old men forget, yet all shall be forgot, but he'll remember, with advantages, what feats he did that day. Then shall our names, familiar in his mouth as household words, Harry the King, Bedford and Exeter, Warwick and Talbot, Salisbury and Gloucester, be in their flowing cups freshly remembered. This story shall the good man teach his son, and Crispian shall ne'er go by from this day to the ending of the world, but we in it shall be remembered. We few, we happy few, we band of brothers, for he today that sheds his blood with me shall be my brother. Be he ne'er so vile, this day shall gentle his condition. And gentlemen in England now abed shall think themselves accursed they were not here, and hold their manhoods cheap, whiles any speaks that fought with us upon St. Crispin's day. And so they fight the battle, and England wins a stunning success, based largely on Henry's unconventional tactics. The French are fighting very straightforward. They have tons and tons of armored knights riding on their huge, expensive horses. And Henry has longbowmen. These people who, it's actually law in England at this point that they have to practice every Sunday with the longbow. A lot of them are professional mercenaries who've been fighting in England's rebellions and disputes with Wales and with some of the rowdy northern lords for the past 10 or 15 years. So these guys know what they're doing. And Henry deploys them, and they just carve up these poor French nobles who were walking around in like 50 to 100 pounds of armor. So once they fall, they're so exhausted they can't get up. Whereas the longbowmen are just wearing like normal street clothes, basically, maybe a little light armor, but they're light on their feet, they're maneuverable, and the knights have no answer for them whatsoever. So the French just get torn to shreds in this battle. And at one point, England has taken so many prisoners that the prisoners actually outnumber the remaining English soldiers, or else the prisoners' number is so high that they pose a serious threat to their captors. If the prisoners realized that all they needed to do was pick up some weapons off dead bodies and start fighting their captors, the English army would be in real trouble. So Henry orders the execution of all these prisoners. In the play, Shakespeare has the French attack the English baggage train, like sneak around behind the English camp and attack their supplies, which were being guarded by the young boys, like the pages who were kind of hanging on to some of the English lords. And the French kill all the pages. This is in Shakespeare's play. And this is the justification that Henry has for ordering the killing of all the French prisoners, which is a real historical event. Henry really did do this in the real Battle of Agincourt, and Shakespeare feels the need to excuse it by having the French commit an atrocity first. But in real life, this is just a smart move on Henry's part. The day isn't won yet. If these prisoners escaped, this could really swing the tide of battle. But it's morally very dubious. And we see all throughout this play that Henry is willing to do these morally dubious things to get what he needs to get. And the ultimate question remains, does he have some high moral, respectable end in mind? Does he really think that this is going to be good for his people as well as for himself? And do therefore the ends he seeks justify the sketchy means that he uses to achieve them? Does the ultimate good that could potentially arise from the Battle of Agincourt justify this cowardly, if clever, strategy of killing prisoners who can't fight back? We don't know.
I think one of the things we have to remember about the Battle of Agincourt, held during the Middle Ages, this is thought to be the bloodiest battle of all these years. And if you think about the intensity of such copious amounts of blood, it makes that English victory even more astonishing, and what Henry wrought even more laudable, which I think is in part what Shakespeare wanted to do.
Laudable in the sense of impressive, you mean?
Laudable in the sense of trying to make, for the time Shakespeare wrote this play, a hero, someone the general populace could admire.
So the final scene is the negotiation that goes on after the battle, after Henry has won and France has lost. And Henry, of course, wants claim to all the French lands, but his chief demand is the hand of Catherine, the daughter of the French king. He wants to marry her. And so he gets a chance to meet her for the first time in this scene. And as is typical of Henry throughout this play, he does some really odd stuff as he talks to her. This scene also includes Catherine's lady's maid, Catherine's sort of handler and friend, Alice, who's much older and a little bit better at English than Catherine, although not by much. Fair Catherine, and most fair, will you vouchsafe to teach a soldier terms such as will enter at a lady's ear and plead his love suit to her gentle heart?
Your Majesty shall mock at me. I cannot speak your England.
Oh, fair Catherine, If you will love me soundly with your French heart, I will be glad to hear you confess it brokenly with your English tongue. Do you like me, Kate?
Pardonnez-moi, I cannot tell what is like me.
An angel is like you, Kate, and you are like an angel.
Que dit-il? Que je suis semblable à les anges? Oui, vraiment, sauf votre grâce, ainsi dit-il.
I said so, dear Catherine, and I must not blush to affirm it.
Oh, bon Dieu. Les langues des hommes sont pleines de tromperies.
What says she, fair one? That the tongues of men are full of deceits?
Oui, that the tongues of the man is be full of deceits. That is the princess.
The princess is the better Englishwoman. If faith, Kate, my wooing is fit for thy understanding, I am glad thou canst speak no better English. For if thou couldst, thou wouldst find me such a plain king that thou wouldst think I had sold my farm to buy my crown. I know no ways to mince it in love, but directly to say, I love you. Then if you urge me farther than to say, do you, in faith, I wear out my suit. Give me your answer, if faith, do, and so clap hands and a bargain. How say you, lady?
Sauf votre honneur, me understand well.
Marry, if you would put me to verses, or to dance for your sake, Kate, why, you undid me. For the one I have neither words nor measure, and for the other I have no strength in measure, yet a reasonable measure in strength. If I could win a lady at leapfrog, or by vaulting into my saddle with my armor on my back, under the correction of bragging be it spoken, I should quickly leap into a wife. Or if I might buffet for my love, or bound my horse for her favors, I could lay on like a butcher, and sit like a jackanapes, never off. But before God, Kate, I cannot look greenly, nor gasp out my eloquence, nor have I no cunning in protestation, only downright oaths, which I never use till urged, nor never break for urging. If thou canst love a fellow of this temper, Kate, whose face is not worth sunburning, that never looks in his glass for love of anything he sees there, let thine eye be thy cook. I speak to thee, plain soldier. If thou canst love me for this, take me. If not, to say to thee that I shall die is true, but for thy love, by the Lord, no. Yet I love thee too. And while thou liv'st, dear Kate, take a fellow of plain and uncoined constancy, for he perforce must do thee right, because he hath not the gift to woo in other places. For these fellows of infinite tongue that can rhyme themselves into ladies' favors, they do always reason themselves out again. What? A speaker is but a prater, a rhyme is but a ballad. A good leg will fall, a straight back will stoop, a black beard will turn white, a curled pate will grow bald, a fair face will wither, a full eye will wax hollow. But a good heart, Kate, is the sun and the moon. Or rather the sun and not the moon, for it shines bright and never changes, but keeps his course truly. If thou would have such a one, take me, and take me, take a soldier. Take a soldier, take a king. And what say'st thou then to my love? Speak, my fair, and fairly I pray thee.
Is it possible that I should love the enemy of France?
Oh, no, it is not possible you should love the enemy of France, Kate. But in loving me, you should love the friend of France. For I love France so well that I will not part with a village of it. I will have it all mine. And, Kate, when France is mine and I am yours, then yours is France, and you are mine.
I cannot tell what is that.
No, Kate, I will tell thee in French, which I am sure will hang upon my tongue like a new married wife about her husband's neck, hardly to be shook off. Je compte sur la possession de France Et quand vous avez les possessions de moi, let me see, what then? Saint-Denis be my speed. Donc votre est France, et vous êtes mien. It is as easy for me, Kate, to conquer the kingdom as to speak so much more French. I shall never move thee in French, unless it be to laugh at me.
Sauf votre honneur, le François que vous parlez, il est meilleur que l'anglais lesquels je parle.
No, faith, this not, Kate, but thy speaking of my tongue and I thine, most truly falsely, must needs be granted to be much at one. But, Kate, dost thou understand thus much English? Canst thou love me?
I cannot tell.
Can any of your neighbors tell, Kate? I'll ask them. Come, I know thou lovest me, and at night when you come into your closet you'll question this gentlewoman about me, and I know, Kate, you will to her dispraise those parts in me that you love with your heart. But, good Kate, mock me mercifully, the rather gentle princess, because I love thee cruelly. If ever thou be'st mine, Kate, as I have a saving faith within me tells me thou shalt, I get thee with scambling, and thou must therefore needs prove a good soldier breeder. Shall not thou and I between Saint-Denis and St. George compound a boy, half French, half English, that shall go to Constantinople and take the Turk by the beard? Shall we not? What say'st thou, my fair Fleur de Luce?
I do not know that.
Now, 'tis hereafter to know, but now to promise. Do but now promise, Kate, you will endeavour for your French part of such a boy, and for my English moiety take the word of a king and a bachelor. How answer you, la plus belle Catherine du monde, mon très cher et devant-des?
Your Majesty avait fausse French enough to deceive the most sage demoiselle that is en France.
Now, fie upon my false French. By mine honour, in true English, I love thee, Kate, by which honour I dare not swear thou lovest me, yet my blood begins to flatter me that thou dost, notwithstanding the poor and untempering effect of my visage. Now, beshrew my father's ambition, he was thinking of civil wars when he got me. Therefore was I created with a stubborn outside, with an aspect of iron, that when I come to woo ladies, I fright them. But in faith, Kate, the elder I wax, the better I shall appear. My comfort is that in old age, that ill layer-up of beauty can do no more spoil upon my face. Thou hast me, if thou hast me, at the worst, and thou shalt wear me, if thou wear me, better and better. And therefore tell me, most fair Catherine, will you have me? Put off your maiden blushes, avouch the thoughts of your heart with the looks of an empress, take me by the hand, and say, Harry of England, I am thine. Which word thou shalt no sooner bless mine ear withal, but I will tell thee aloud, England is thine, Ireland is thine, France is thine, and Harry Plantagenet is thine. Who, though I speak it before his face, if he be not fellow with the best king, thou shalt find the best king of good fellows. Come, your answer in broken music, for thy voice is music, and thy English broken. Therefore, Queen of all, Catherine, break thy mind to me in broken English. Wilt thou have me?
That is as it shall please the roi mon père.
Nay, it will please him, Kate. It shall please him, Kate.
Then it shall also content me.
Upon that I kiss your hand, and I call you my queen.
Laissez, monseigneur, laissez, laissez. Ma foi, je ne veux point que vous abaissez votre grandeur en baissant la main de votre seigneurie indigne serviteur. Excusez-moi, je vous supplie, mon très puissant seigneur.
Then I will kiss your lips, Kate.
Les dames et demoiselles pour être baisées devant leurs noces. Il n'est pas le canton de France.
Madam, my interpreter, what says she?
That it is not be the fashion pour les ladies of France. I cannot tell what is basé on English.
To kiss.
Your Majesty entendre better que moi.
It is not a fashion for the maids in France to kiss before they are married, would she say?
Oui, vraiment.
Oh, Kate, nice customs curtsy to great kings. Dear Kate, you and I cannot be confined within the weak list of a country's fashion. We are the makers of manners, Kate, and the liberty that follows our places stops the mouth of all fine faults, as I will do yours, for upholding the nice fashion of your country in denying me a kiss. Therefore, patiently and yielding. You have witchcraft in your lips, Kate. There is more eloquence in a sugar touch of them than in the tongues of the French council, and they should sooner persuade Harry of England than a general petition of monarchs. Here comes your father.
So the Duke of Burgundy enters with the French king. God save your Majesty, my royal cousin teach you our princess English?
I would have her learn, my fair cousin, how perfectly I love her, and that is good English.
Is she not apt?
Our tongue is rough, coz, and my condition is not smooth, so that having neither the voice nor the heart of flattery about me, I cannot so conjure up the spirit of love in her that he will appear in his true likeness.
Pardon the frankness of my mirth, if I answer you for that. If you would conjure in her, you must make a circle. If conjure up love in her in his true likeness, he must appear naked and blind. Can you blame her then, being a maid, yet rosed over with the virgin crimson of modesty, if she deny the appearance of a naked, blind boy in her naked seeing self? It were, my lord, a hard condition for a maid to consign to.
Yet they do wink and yield, as love is blind and enforces.
They are then excused, my lord, when they see not what they do.
Then, good my lord, teach your cousin to consent, winking.
I will wink on her to consent, my lord, if you will teach her to know my meaning. For maids, well summered and kept warm, are like flies at Bartholomew-tide, blind though they have their eyes, and then they will endure handling, which before would not abide looking on.
This moral ties me over to time and a hot summer, and so I shall catch the fly, your cousin, in the latter end, and she must be blind too.
As love is, my lord, before it loves.
It is so. And you may some of you thank love for my blindness, who cannot see many a fair French city for one fair French maid that stands in my way. So, after spending the entire play using his incredible powers of speech to inspire unthinkable deeds from his soldiers, Henry spends about 10 minutes telling his fiancée that he's this ugly, stupid guy. He's such a bumpkin that people would think he had sold his farm to buy his crown. That he can't talk well, he can't mince it in love, but he loves her with all this pure, simple English virtue and passion. And he's just about got her coming around when Burgundy and the rest of them come back in, and King Henry and Burgundy start doing this jock banter with each other, where, they're joking about having sex with Catherine and, having her be naked and stuff in front of her, and not only in front of her, but in front of her parents, the King and Queen of France, whom Henry is also negotiating with. So it's this incredible display of power on Henry's part. I can come in here and joke about having sex with your daughter, and there's nothing you can do about it. but it's also this really weird cognitive dissonance where Henry is saying one minute, I love you so much, you'll be my wonderful, beloved queen. And then the very next moment, he's making these dirty jokes about her right in front of her face. What on earth are we supposed to make of this guy? We don't know. That's the beauty of Shakespeare, and it's up to you to listen and decide. So thank you. This is the end of our two-parter on King Henry V.
Well, thank you for having me. I apologize for my mingling of French and English with French accent, and I hope I get to participate in one of these again.
Thanks very much, Mom. Thank you for listening. This is Our Brief Hour on WVUD HD2 Newark, The Basement. Tune in next week, where we will be looking at Romeo and Juliet in conversation, what the two lovers actually say to each other and don't just dream about or imagine or talk about with their buddies. So thanks for listening. Have a great Friday and a great weekend. See you next week. Bye-bye.